All right, good evening, everybody. My name's Joe, the AI guy. I just recently changed it from Joe, the data guy. What I'm planning to do here is to go through a couple steps of making or using Python to summarize YouTube videos. How I'm going to do that is with I'd say 4 basic steps to start with, and then there will probably be things that we need to expand upon to do that. The first part is just making sure we can take a chunk of text and then condense it down into something else that would be the summarizing portion. Then to even improve upon that, when the text goes past a certain size, models cannot take it in anymore. Basically, they will take, the first, some of them, the smaller ones have like 500 word limits, 1,000 words. Now, a lot of the GPTs can pretty much take everything in. You don't need to break it into pieces, but you do get better performance there in terms of the summarization when you do break it into the pieces, and how you break those into the pieces can determine how well it goes. In this case, the model that I intend to use is something that can run locally on your computer, so you don't need anything like ChatGPT or a Claude subscription to run this. It's all going to go from your computer. The only thing you would need is a connection that is strong enough to run the downloads fairly quickly, because the first time that you set this up, it will need to install the models, which across all the ones that we'll be using for this is about 5 gigabytes of space, plus however large your YouTube video is. We will be using the audio from the YouTube video, so it won't be quite as large as it would be if you were just downloading the video form here. So on average, I would say leave about a megabyte or 2 per minute for the video that you intend to download. So compared to the things we need to download for the model, it's nowhere near as large. But all in all, you need about 5 gigabytes, I believe, for everything to fully install. That includes the packages and the models that we need. So I am starting here from a fresh environment from scratch. And you would select the kernel here, which by default selects Python 3. And then let's write what those steps are going to be here, and then we'll break each section into it. So the first section is the packages that you need to install. So installing packages via pip. If you have PyPy, it's very similar process. The command changes slightly. Sorry. And then if you are on Conda or something like that, instead of using a pip install, you use conda install for that. So we'll leave then a cell for that, and then we'll come down. The first thing that we would want to do is to summarize text. It honestly takes about 5 lines of code to set up a summarizer and have it run through. So I'm going to leave like 2 here for that, and then 1 for our data that we're going to store. Then talking about breaking large chunks of text into these smaller pieces. This is referred to as chunking. Basically, you're going to, in the most simplest form, break it into pieces at the cutoff of the model. You can do some experimentation around here. What size works best for what you're doing. There is a thing called overlap, which is basically on both ends of where you're cutting it off, leave some extra characters, so that way it's not stopping dead at that point, and then you're losing some of the context when that happens. You could imagine if you're in the middle of a YouTube video, they cut off right in the middle of the key point, just because that randomly happens to be where we hit that arbitrary cutoff, and then that point gets completely glossed over. With the chunking, it'll go basically a little bit before, a little bit before that cutoff when it starts the next piece. So think about it, if you were like breaking a long show into episodes instead of it being, like a continuous run through, you're going to have a beginning and end of the episode to kind of recap what's happening or set up the next episode. So with the overlap here, you're hoping to catch some of the context from let's use that episode example, that previous episode and then bring it forward into the one that you're about to start. So that way your viewers can pick up whenever. And the same concept here with the overlap and the chunking is to give more context to each of the pieces so that way you don't miss some of those points here. So I'll leave a few spaces for that. And then there is a process to download the audio of a YouTube video. And that will only take a couple lines of code. And then we need something to convert that audio into text. And OpenAI has a public model available called Whisper. You can just download that in a base package in Python. Or you can download that in a base package in Python and then run everything on your computer. You don't need to make a call out to ChatGPT or OpenAI. So even though I'm saying we're using OpenAI here, it's not that we're actually calling out to ChatGPT. It's an open source model of what they have, and it specifically is focused on transcribing. So then turn audio into a text transcript. Put that here, and then section. This is going to be model improvements that we'll do later beyond the initial one. So to get started here, we need to find some text and summarize it. So I'm just going out and doing a quick Google search for text from Tale of Two Cities. And then there's the full text archive, which will have it. And so I'm going to call this our summarize this text. Just doing some cleanup here to make sure that everything will go together all at once. Make sure we close that off. So there we go. What this gigantic thing is this is the entire first chapter of A Tale of Two Cities in text form. Oh, sorry. And then we're going to run through the process here, actually generating the text. So, like I said, you'll only need a few lines of code to actually pull that off. But to do that, you'll need the pip in transformers package. We'll need lang chain text splitters. We're going to use that for the chunking section. That's the token encoder. The YT-DLP is literally the Python library for the YouTube downloader. Opening a Whisper package, which has that Whisper model in it. And I think that's everything we need to get started. So install, for me, this shouldn't take long because a lot of these are already here on this machine. We then want it to summarize the text. Goes. There are a few things from that transformer package that we need, so we need to now get those out. So from transformers, we are going to use the BART tokenizer. BART is an open source model from Facebook that they have made available for anyone to use. And there are two parts of that. The first part is the tokenizer, which transforms words into basically number representations for the model. And then you'll call that tokenizer back at the end to turn them back into the summarized text. So we have that. Perfect. Give it a moment to run through this and see when we got any obvious errors at the beginning. And then we want to generate that text summary, so I want to give it a text. And like I said, it takes about 5 lines of code. Did I spell it? Oh. Case. So first part here is the tokenizer encoding and decoding steps. Both run through the same model. We're going to use that BART tokenizer that we had mentioned here before. Oops. I'm just off on the keyboard. We're going to go from one of the pre-trained models that it has stored locally after you download the package. And then we have the tokenizer set up. We also need to set up the model for the conditional generation. And so we do the same thing here. And we're going to use the exact same model on it. So we're bringing this line down here too. So we told it the tokenizer to use. We told it the model to use. Now we have to actually take the text and do the transformation here. So I'm going to say the text input. It's a new variable. What it's going to do is we are going to run through the tokenizer. We're going to tell it to encode it, which is then doing that transformation. It's going to do that from the text that you provided it. And then there are some length restrictions on it. What this says here is it will allow 1,024 not characters, but tokens. And then it will truncate once it reaches that limit. And then the return tensor's argument here is because I plan to use the same model for encoding. So instead of returning the number representations, it's actually going to return the specific tensor arrays that contain the information. So then I've transformed the text into the encoding. I then do need to work with the BART model here to actually generate that summary. My spelling is awful. So now we're going to take the text input here. And you're going to give it 2 arguments, the max length and the minimum length for how large of a summary that you would like. These are, for me, completely arbitrary values that I've set. Basically, I'm saying if I give you 1,000 tokens, at the most, I should get back 80% of that, at the minimum, about 10% if you're doing a summarization. You can define it much more broadly if you like, but it tends to prefer to bring back smaller size chunks from the summary. So if you give it 1,000, but you don't specify a min length, it could return 25, 50 words, which may not be a good representation of the key points that are in that 1,000-word section. And then once you have that, you need to take that summary and turn it back into the text from it. So then you're going to use that BART tokenizer. You're going to decode the summary in just the text part of the summary. And then you want that summary back out. So that's why we're returning the text summary. So you go ahead and do that. And now we'll need a couple things here. So what should we call this distorted? We want to then use that generate text summary. We're going to pass it summarize this text, which is what we saved that first chapter as. While that's running, we're going to call it to set up tale of 2. So this will take a moment, not too long overall, but it's basically making one pass at all that we gave it to try and do the summarization. So there we go. It gives a very basic summary. What time of the year? There's 2 countries that are going against one another. It starts famously like it was the best of times, it was worst of times. It's a comparison of the English and the French. But that's a decent enough summary of the first chapter there. And I'm just curious, how much did it prefer to give back to me? 546, so about the middle of the range I gave it. So look at like the tale of 2, and then I go to the length of summarize. So because of this is a string, it's going to give me like the per character. So we gave it almost 6,000 characters, took those and broke those into pieces. So it would only have taken the first 1,000 words that it actually encountered here, went into the encoding, and then after that, after that, it would go through and not continue at that point. It's just going to automatically truncate once it had reached that limit. Okay, figure out what that sound was. Next, we'll work on taking that chunk of code. Actually, let me use this chance real quick just to check. Okay. I just want to see if there was any chat messages or anything like that. I don't see them. Oh. Woke up at about 4 a.m. this morning. It's been a long day, so I won't be running too long here. Already gotten through the basic summarizer, talk through breaking the large chunks into smaller pieces. And I think these can move fairly quickly from here. So one of the things that we want to do now is then, instead of just generate the text summary, write a function that I'm going to say generate the chunks, then, summarize. Same thing, we're going to give it a text input. Continuing back up to here, we have those. Great. I think this is actually from. Why am I blanking on what package this is from? Oh, it was the TikTok encoder and then the text line chain text splitter. I don't know why I was blanking on that. So then from, what's it called? Yeah, from line chain text splitters, we want to import the recursive character text splitter. Leave. That's all I need. So the idea here is we're just going to call this the text splitter that runs off this. And I'm going to give it a size. So let's do 1,000. And then you want to create a little bit of an overlap. 10 to 20% is fine because it will end up being on both sides of the section. So like if I said 200 chunk overlap, that would mean that it's actually about 400 words overlap. I think generally 10 to 20% is fine because it gets doubled. Anything more than that becomes cumbersome, especially on like large texts, which if your video is running for a while, you will end up having that be the case. So then you break the text. You're using the text splitter, you break those into those chunks just by calling the splitter, telling it to split the text. And we are going to then take that text variable from earlier and now run that through the text splitter split text function. So I need a way to store them. Right, so you have the chunks in one. You then need the summaries to be able to store in another object. That split text does return a list. Same thing here for the chunk summaries. We're going to go through kind of each chunk one by one. So for chunk in those text chunks. And then similar to before, how we called these summary, we're going to do that here. And we're going to, for each one, we're just going to append it to the end of the list. So then we generate text summary, and then put that on the chunk. And then here we have return the chunk summaries. That's what we intend to get back. So now I'm going to call this tail of chunks. And actually, let me run these real quick, just make sure. Good. Then generate chunks. And then summarize that, and we're going to use that same it's not called text, it's called summarize. This text. My brain is trying to go on the autopilot. Let's finish this section, and then I'll probably call it a night, get some sleep, and get caught up on things. Generate chunks. And so this will take slightly longer than before because it's going to break it into pieces, and then for each piece, it will take that additional time to process each one. And because there's a bit of overlap, you're actually end up making the overall size larger by about, in this case, I'm doing 10% chunks, so about 20% overall, which then adds to the processing time that this whole thing takes. So are you done? And so you can see it generated that same first summary as before. But then the second time, or the now second chunk actually got a chance to be summarized. And that's basis of doing these chunks. Like we're going to be feeding it YouTube videos. Most of the videos that people tend to watch are in the 10 to 30 minute range. So you can imagine you'll run through pretty quickly the need for a much larger, much robust model. Otherwise, it'll just take the first 1,000 characters that it encounters, and you won't get much. So if you're summarizing a video that has an ad read right at the beginning or fairly early on, then you wouldn't actually generate anything of use without having this part of chunking it into the pieces and then seeing if there's anything in there specifically that is of interest. So I'm going to call it here. I appreciate those that had come out. We're hitting 10 o'clock and my brain and my eyes are having trouble staying open. So I want to call it here before it gets too hard. Next time will be Thursday. And what I'll do is we'll go through how to download the audio for a YouTube video. We'll turn audio into a text transcript and then talk about some improvements. Like I see here, this is only part of a sentence here. So then going through and finding a way to remove those. We can get things that are better overall instead of having some of these partial thoughts here. So for those of you that came or are seeing this later, thank you for staying there. So we covered basically some basic text summarization. And next time we'll get into audio, video, and then a transcript. And then now that we have those pieces, put that text into the summarizer here and get some results. So thank you for coming and have a great night.